But before we dive into Looni and the brand you're building today, in Facing Forward, we talk about catalytic moments, catalytic stories that really inspire change and positive action. And as I mentioned, as I was diving deeper into your story, you have so many awe-inspiring, catalytic moments. But first, I would love for you to start with your epilepsy diagnosis and how that has really shaped the work you put out into the world in holistic health and women's health.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. It's a real pleasure. We have been trying to organize this for a while and you've been very patient with me. So I really appreciate you. And yeah, I'm really happy to be here. I think, yeah, speaking of catalytic moments, that was definitely a big one for me. We all have a lot, and when we look back at our life and what brings us to the kind of place we're in today, there are a few major ones, and certainly that was one of the major ones. I started getting symptoms with regards to my epilepsy at around 13, and then I got diagnosed at about 15. I think the reason it was such a shock for not just me, but also for my family is because I grew up with an older sister also who struggles with epilepsy. And she has epilepsy, but she has what's known as intractable epilepsy, which means that it's drug resistant. And so we have extremely varying degrees of the condition. My sister lives in full-time care and she can have up to 70, 100 seizures a day and is hospitalized numerous times a year and isn't able to lead a normal life as a result. And in my case, it has been a struggle, but I would say in comparison to my sister, it really is nothing. And I have been able to get on with my life, and I'm now off anticonvulsant medicines. My sister takes a lot of different anticonvulsant medicines. So I think it was strange to be diagnosed with this condition so late in life, having been the cognitively healthy sibling and having seen my sister suffer really severely and spent much of my childhood in and out of intensive care with my sister. We were told she wouldn't live past 18 and she's now 41. So that is a miracle. And I think it was just a real blow. And I really look back at it, and like my parents were in shock and I was in shock. Here was this condition that really had been almost like this dark cloud over my family's shoulders. And I had been the light that came after my sister, who unfortunately was very sick. And then to be diagnosed with the same condition it felt pretty hard, a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah, looking back on my healing journey as well, it's like when you're diagnosed with something that is invisible or you feel healthy to a certain extent, it can be such a shock. I'm curious, what was your healing journey into herbalism? And you're a big advocate of cannabinoids and that holistic healing journey. Take us through what that process was and how that really helped your diagnosis.
Yeah, it's a great point, and you will understand this better than anyone, that living with an invisible illness is really challenging I think, to come to accept it yourself, because other people don't see it. And you feel it, and sometimes you're feeling something that is really shaping your life and your everyday, yet other people see you as they did before and in that same light. And so I think and especially as a teenager, for me, that was challenging, being just that deep desire to fit in, which I think teenagers have. And then having this chronic condition that was really triggered by all of the things that teenagers do and want to do. Staying up all night, lack of sleep. My seizures are triggered by stress, lack of sleep, alcohol, skipping meals, anything like that. So that was particularly challenging. And mentioned before, I was put on a cocktail of anticonvulsant medicines, really challenged my mental health and really changed my personality. And I think what was tough was that I was on them for so long that it then became are these symptoms, or is this symptomatic of taking the drugs that I'm on, or is this just me? And I think that is also a struggle for anyone that takes medication, is really starting to get to know the you on medication and wondering, what you left behind or who you were before and how you changed. And I grew up in a family that valued like holistic healing and alternative medicine. I started having acupuncture at the age of 13 to help with initially stress, but then to help with my epilepsy. My mum had briefly studied homeopathy and was also an animal healer and practiced mediumship as well.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I didn't necessarily come from like the most conventional upbringing in regards to how we viewed health and healing. And I think a lot of that was really born out of my sister's journey. However, here I was taking these very strong pharmaceutical drugs that I was told that I would have to take indefinitely, and that I really put myself at risk if I didn't take or if I missed a day. And I think for anyone that suffers from seizures, epilepsy, or a number of other health conditions, you know that fear of skipping a medication or fear of, you potentially might forget taking it. And I spent many years just battling with like insomnia and anxiety, struggles with memory, challenges with concentration. I was very irritable. I was very angry. And I always wanted to experience life off medication. And I think I had this natural pull towards plant medicine because of the environment in which I grew up with. My mum also, just to give a bit of background, is a florist and garden designer. So it's, I think within the blood. But I think also just having to like feeling that I was really like shackled by the pharmaceuticals I was on made this deep desire to have a cleaner system and to work with natural medicine and natural products. I think it heightened that for me. And all that to say, when I was about 27, I was introduced to cannabinoids from the cannabis plant, which had a profound impact on my health and on my seizures. And I was fortunate enough to be able to wean off all of my anticonvulsant medicines. And I think it's always important to caveat that by saying I was and have been incredibly lucky. And cannabinoids are still a medicine, and they should be considered like other, medicines and drugs in that they work well for some and they don't work for others. And just because you have a certain type of epilepsy, which in my case is JME, juvenile myoclonic epilepsy, I've met other people with epilepsy with the same condition that have used cannabinoids and haven't been as lucky. Some have also weaned off their medication. Some are using, CBD in conjunction with their anticonvulsants. But I like to be responsible and say that because it's always important to consult your doctor and know that this is just not a one size fits all. But I started using cannabinoids and quite instantly noticed just such a shift in the way that I was feeling cognitively. I often use Humpty Dumpty as an analogy. Like it felt like I had been put back together again. I was Humpty Dumpty into all these tiny pieces, and suddenly I'd been put back together. It was like a sense of wholeness. It's hard to describe what having epilepsy feels, but it was just like someone had plugged me into the power source. And I knew my body, I knew how I felt for many years, and I knew quite quickly that this was a more efficacious medicine for me than what I had been previously taking. And as you can imagine, it's a pretty big moment. I started taking it for 6 months alongside my anticonvulsants, and then I decided to, as responsibly as I could, very slowly wean off all of my medication. And I am still seizure-free, and it's been almost 10 years now.
Wow. It's such a powerful story because I feel conventional medicine, Western medicine can be such a blessing, but it can also cause so much, from my story, just going through cancer treatment, a lot of fear and a lot of, I was so scared to leave the hospital when I was done with treatment. And I would feel like I was just like this, I felt so caged to these conventional forms of medicine. But then which I feel like you were too, or it seems like you were too, this rebellious patient who was like, no, I'm listening to my body. Like I have this, and it seems like from your upbringing as well, and just being around nature and holistic healing, that you were able to tune into your intuition and really be an advocate for your own health and healing.